So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the first Civil Service College webinar of 2024. We're really excited to present this to you today. Really excited to have our expert Rebecca Rothwell with us, who's going to be talking about inclusive writing and ditching the bias. Before we get into today's webinar, I just want to share a couple of things with you. We are recording this session, so if you prefer to keep your camera off and your microphone on mute, that would probably be preferred. And we've got two functions for you today. So you can use the chat, which hopefully you're familiar with. I've written in the chat so you can hopefully see that. Please, any comments that you've got or any thoughts that you want to share throughout today's webinar, please pop them in the chat. And I will be looking after the chat today. By the way, I'm Kat Thorne. I'm one of the Associate Directors here at Civil Service College. And I will help Rebecca with the chat and try to feed in your comments and questions. And if you have a more specific question, you can use the Q&A box as well. So we've got both of those functions here today. As I said, we are recording this and it will be made available on our YouTube channel usually within a week or so. So we're so thrilled to have so much interest for this webinar this afternoon. I'm really excited to have, we had over, I think, 300 registrations from a truly global audience. So very excited. So Rebecca, if you don't mind just switching the slide over for me, I just wanted to just introduce the Civil Service College to those of you. I know we've got people joining today who are familiar with Civil Service College, but I just wanted, for those of you who perhaps might be new for you, just tell you a little bit about who we are. And so Civil Service College is an organisation that's been working for many years with organisations across the public sector and the civil service. We work with organisations, particularly in a tailored way, to really help them achieve their specific learning and development requirements. We work with many different organisations. You can see some of the organisations here on the screen, ranging from Ministry of Justice, the Home Office, Scottish Parliament, and many more. And some of the topics that we are most renowned for are topics like leadership, communication, governance, and so on. So it's just a little bit about us, and we're going to be sharing towards the end of the webinar how you can learn more about inclusive writing with Rebecca afterwards. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Rebecca, and Rebecca, I'll just be feeding you things through the chat as they come through this afternoon. So over to you.
Oh, that's great. Thanks ever so much, Kat, and welcome to everybody. Please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat box. I'm Rebecca Rothwell. I live in South Wales in the UK. Part of inclusive writing is understanding our own situations, our own relationships, and our own bias. So if you want to put anything in the chat, please feel free to go ahead. So I'll start by welcoming everybody today. In the civil service, effective communication is paramount, and inclusive writing plays a crucial role in fostering transparency, fairness, and accessibility. By embracing inclusive language, we not only reflect diverse perspectives within our society, but we're also doing everything we can to ensure that our messages are comprehensible and resonate with as wide an audience as possible. Today, we'll explore why inclusive writing is a cornerstone in the civil service, promoting equal understanding, engagement, and trust. I've split it into 4 sections, roughly the same length. So first of all, we'll look at what inclusive writing is. Then we'll address the current debates and challenges that we see in today's society around inclusivity and diversity. Then I couldn't help but look at artificial intelligence for inclusive writing, appreciating that we're all come at AI from different perspectives and different starting points. And then we'll end the webinar with some practical tips and resources, some quick wins that you can take away from today. I'll be looking for people to interact with the course using the chat box at several times throughout the day. Please be assured it's free from judgment, and I'm genuinely curious to where your thoughts are on particular topics. This webinar is designed to be a taster of my inclusive writing course, which is designed specifically for communicators in the civil service. So I can't give too much away, but I hope that today will certainly whet your appetite. So let's start off by a really foundational question as to what inclusive writing is. And this is the first chance for you to engage with today's webinar using the chat box. Let's see what you think. Please post in the chat box your thoughts and definitions as to what inclusive writing means to you. This will be a really interesting look into what you think inclusive writing is, and then we can build on that for today's webinar. Please go ahead.
So first person who shared has said, Emma Rigby has said, well, making everyone feel welcome. And then we've got quite a few answers coming in now. So compassionate leadership, jargon-free, writing that doesn't use any exclusionary language, tailored for a respective audience, irrespective of grades and experience, using non-gender-based language, accessible to a variety of audiences, writing that doesn't alienate.
There's really good answers coming in, and it's really great for me to see who's on the call as well, because where people's thoughts are. Please feel free to keep going in the chat box. I'm going to start to move on now and hopefully start to incorporate some of your ideas as we go through. This is really exciting. Thank you so much. So inclusive writing is a communication approach that recognises and respects the diversity of individuals. It acknowledges and embraces differences in culture, gender, ability, and as many other factors that we can think of. It aims to create content that is accessible and relatable to a broad audience, avoiding language that may exclude or marginalise. It's presenting information without favouritism or prejudice. It involves conveying facts, opinions, and perspectives in a fair and impartial manner. Ultimately, inclusive writing ensures that your content is free from discrimination, promoting fairness and equity in communication. I'm so grateful for the intelligent, thoughtful comments that are coming through. We really are covering a lot of ground already. What I've got here on this slide are, if you like, a boiled down version of where my thoughts are. I've split them into what I think, and these are just my thoughts, is what I think are the core principles and benefits of inclusive writing as specific to the civil service. So the core principles, I've used 3 because 3 can be a really memorable number, I suppose. So respecting diverse identities, avoiding stereotypes, fostering representation. And why? What are the benefits? Well, we build connections, we create accessible content, and we'll go through that later on, and we promote fairness. This slide just gives some really quick wins as to examples of exclusive being the opposite of inclusive writing. So if you're writing for the media, instead of using homeless people, use people experiencing homelessness. We put the person first. If you're writing to market something, to publicize it, to advertise it, instead of using for the ladies, put for everyone who loves, for example, or focus on features and benefits that appeal to that really broad audience. If you're writing for a technical purpose or for a technical audience, instead of using whitelisted or blacklisted, use allowed or denied, or alternative terms with less negative connotations. if you're a social media expert, if you're writing for external comms, instead of something like you guys, use everyone or folks or more inclusive alternatives to gendered terms. And then if you want to flex your own creative writing skills, whether that's professionally or whether it's personally, instead of using stereotypes based on ethnicity, religion, or other personal characteristics, use your skill, use your pens and your wisdom to develop nuanced and diverse characters that have agency, that have individuality. And it's not easy. First of all, we have to recognize what we're doing before we can establish change in how we do these things. What I'd like to do on this slide is discuss the impact of language on diverse audiences. I love words and I love linguistics, and I appreciate hugely that language wields immense power in shaping perceptions and experiences. In a diverse society such as ours here in the UK, the impact of language on diverse audiences cannot be overstated. Words can bridge gaps. They can also reinforce divides. Inclusive writing ensures that our communication resonates with individuals from different backgrounds, fostering a sense of belonging and understanding. It empowers us to connect authentically, promoting unity and equity within the diverse civil service community. And here's another opportunity for you to engage actively with the webinar. I'd like to go back to you now because I'm curious to know if you've encountered instances of non-inclusive writing or other forms of communication, whether it might be videos, whether it's adverts, whether it's images, songs. And if you have encountered instances of non-inclusive writing, how did it make you feel? I'm also curious to know if you have unknowingly written exclusively rather than inclusively. And there's no judgment. I think we've all done it or are still doing it. We're all learning. So please do put in the chat box examples of where you've seen exclusive writing and how it's made you feel. Have you felt othered, for example?
So somebody's just commented the use of guys is one that comes up often. I'm not a, they said I'm not a guy, and it just becomes a drip effect of not feeling valued.
The guys is really interesting because it's an Americanism. It's an Americanism that's come over, but it's one that perhaps the time is right to confront it.
Yes,
that girls no longer have to pretend that they're guys.
This is an interesting one from Farah. She says, I use folks all the time now, but never sure what people think of it.
Oh, that's really interesting. Folk is it's quite a traditional term, I think. It reminds me of in the cartoon when they say that's all folks at the end.
Yeah. Sean said, I've encountered non-inclusive writing on social media posts and it made me feel left out.
Yeah, that's it. It's how it makes you feel. Is we remember how things make us feel beyond the actual thing that made us feel that, if that makes sense.
This is another interesting comment here. Women's network meetings being described as chats.
As in slightly derogatory, and undermining sort of view, perhaps.
Yes, potentially, yeah.
We've got some professional terms coming through. That's great because we'll come to those later on. We've got fireman instead of firefighter, I can see in the chat there. Oh, this is great. Brilliant. I'll move us on, I think, but this is working really well. I'm thrilled. Thank you so much. I'm going to look at section 2 now. If you remember, I said that the webinar was in 4 sections and we're already flying on to the second section. And this is where we'll look at current debates and challenges. As we navigate the landscape of inclusive writing, it's essential to acknowledge the various perspectives that contribute to this ongoing dialogue within the civil service. Some people advocate for a strict adherence to traditional language uses, emphasising clarity and consistency in communication. Other people may champion a more progressive approach, pushing for language that evolves with societal changes and reflects contemporary values. Sometimes we can see that we sometimes see public communications being less formal than perhaps they used to be. By exploring these diverse viewpoints, we gain an understanding of the challenges and opportunities embedded in the pursuit of inclusive writing within our professional sphere. If you do sign up for the course, or the inclusive writing course, we'll dive into these debates with care, exploring and learning as we go. But for now, here's just a glimpse at the current discussions shaping the civil service's approach to inclusive writing. I'm going to fire off a load of rhetorical questions. Please feel free to simply listen and consider, or add any answers or comments in the chat box as we go. So first of all, looking at gender neutrality, pronouns, he, her, she, they, them. Should we always use the singular they instead of he or she? How do we navigate non-binary identities? And gendered language, should we replace the generic man with person, or use gender neutral alternatives like they or them? Is it fireman or firefighter or firewoman? Is policeman outdated? Should we use police officer? The one that always gets me stuck is fisherman. How do you turn fisherman into a gender neutral term when you've got a woman who was a fisher person? I don't know. If someone's got the solution to that, that would make my day. Cultural sensitivity, avoiding stereotypes and appropriation. How do we represent diverse cultures authentically without falling into harmful stereotypes and tropes? The terminology, the language we use, when is it appropriate to use specific cultural terms, and how do we avoid that misappropriation? And let's look at the global audiences now. How on earth do we adjust our language for different cultural contexts and sensitivities? Do we use global US spelling instead of UK spelling? And if we do, what does that tell our audience about our company? Disability and neurodiversity, using person-first language. So should we say a person with autism or an autistic person? Then let's look at ableism and the language we use around that. How do we avoid ableist language that excludes or demeans people with disabilities? And then there's neurodiversity awareness. How can we be mindful of different cognitive styles and learning preferences in our writing? Here, this one I think is particularly powerful, the intersectionality and power dynamics. So those people in positions of authority, acknowledging systemic inequalities. How can our language address issues like racism, sexism, and classism? Avoiding harmful biases. How can we ensure our inclusive language doesn't inadvertently reinforce existing power structures? We can do the very best that we can, but by doing that, are we actually making things worse? And then by centering marginalized voices, can we give platform and amplification to diverse perspectives in our own writing? I know I'm flying through these, but I just want to cover as much ground as we can. I'd love to delve into these with you in the future, if possible. And this one is particularly interesting. So with the Civil Service Style Guide, it's a Microsoft Word document that is constantly in need of updating. So how do we evolve our language choices and our grammar choices and our sentence styles, keeping up with change. How do we stay informed about evolving language practices and terminology? Balancing inclusivity and clarity. How can we find a balance between using inclusive language and maintaining clear and concise communication? And being open to learning. How can we cultivate an attitude of openness and continuous learning around inclusive language? Now, Kat, I know I've just thrown, I don't know how many questions, 15 questions out there to the audience. Has anything come through in the chat that you think is worth sharing a little bit louder or a little bit wider, or something perhaps that's been repeated, or anything that people are particularly passionate about or frustrated about that comes through?
Well, we identified, so Gabriella, who works in marine and fisheries, said fisher is the correct term, so that's good to know.
Fisher.
Yes, and lots of people confirmed that. So just wanted to clear that up. Bailey said, oh sorry, it might be Anne Monique, culture will impact how we see certain terms. For example, guys in my country is not considered offensive. It is seen as gender neutral. And remembering that on this webinar today, we've got people from many different locations across the globe. So that's quite an interesting point, I think.
Yeah, really interesting, and so important to recognise as well and to appreciate. So knowing your audience is so key.
There's a couple of questions here as well. Alison has asked, is it okay for us to impose language on an industry that wants to maintain and is happy with its own industry? And she's referring to fisheries. And then Mina has asked, how do you bring the majority of people who don't want to adjust to inclusive writing and or language?
Oh, like really, really interesting questions. So to go back to Alison's point about whether we impose language change, I think an experienced change management system would tell you that an imposition of enforced language change is really, really difficult, because it's not just about the words that we speak, it's about our experiences that form the vocabularies that we have. So I think the culture of a workplace very much determines the language that's used, especially if it's a public-facing comms methodology that's being used. Absolutely fascinating, and certainly one that takes time to embed. And sorry, Kat, the second one I think you said was about how do you begin to approach a group of people who are not particularly interested in changing the vocabulary or changing the way that they're writing. I think it's just I guess it's education, and it's broadening your horizon, and it's realizing the impact of your, I guess it's appreciating how your audience receives what you're saying, what you're writing, empathizing. I think somebody earlier called on the word compassion, which I think is utterly essential when it comes to writing with thoughtfulness and writing with kindness as well. So having a compassionate connection with your audience can really affect the way that you then choose your vocabulary. My goodness me,
yes.
This is really thoughtful stuff coming through from people on the webinar today.
Yeah, and just the last comment before you move on from Viv, she said supporting openness and continued learning for inclusive language as positive.
Oh yes, that's Viv's comment, isn't it? Supporting openness. Yes, yeah, and that idea of continuous learning as well. I mean, our language is evolving all the time, and it's often evolving quicker for younger generations. I think Generation Y, Generation Z, they're coming through. Their influence on the language is enormous. Technology is one of the biggest drivers of language change as well, which actually connects us quite neatly onto the third section of the webinar today, which is looking at how to leverage artificial intelligence for inclusive writing. We've explored the why of inclusive writing, its importance and the ongoing discussions shaping it. Now let's delve into the how with a powerful ally, artificial intelligence, or AI. Imagine having a magic helper who scans your writing, flags potential bias, and suggests alternatives for more inclusive language. Well, that's what AI tools can do. I appreciate that many people on this call may not have used any AI tools before. Equally, some of you may be proficient. Wherever your starting point, let's break it down. Think of AI tools like grammar assistants gone nuts. They go beyond spotting typos and punctuation errors. They sniff out hidden biases and suggest inclusive alternatives. No more wondering if your language might offend or exclude someone. These tools analyze word choice, sentence structure, and even cultural references to identify issues you might miss. Don't worry, AI isn't writing your sentences for you. It's very much a collaboration. You still control the content and message, while AI acts as a friendly, inclusive language advisor. AI doesn't care what it generates. It doesn't care what it writes. It just writes the things that you ask it to. That human level remains with you. So let's have a look at some of these tools then, which you can leverage, some of which are free to use via the internet. So, and please feel free to add to the chat as well if you use other AI tools. It might be that you have access to Microsoft's Copilot, for example, and also your experiences of using these. So we've got Grammarly. So this is a popular assistant anyway, but it's recently had quite a comprehensive update, and it now flags potentially biased language. It offers inclusive alternatives like people with disabilities instead of disabled people. It's only a small change, but it's a change that matters, and it's a change that matters to your audience. Pro Writing Aid. So this is quite a versatile tool, and it dives deeper than Grammarly, identifying gender bias, stereotypes, and even overused cliches. And not only does it point out those bits, it also gives you different choices. So it suggests diverse and quite natural replacements. Equally.ai is another one that I quite like. It's a specialized platform that analyzes your writing for bias against various identity groups. It provides detailed reports and actionable suggestions. Hemingway editor, yeah, absolutely, Kirsty. It's a really, I find from my creative writing, it's really helpful for. Checklist for common mistakes. Jackie, if you hang on, I think we'll address that as the webinar comes to a close when we start looking at the proactive writing tips towards the end. Self-awareness. Yeah, absolutely agree, Jackie. Please feel free to carry on writing in the chat box. It's fascinating to see your thoughts coming through. But don't forget that AI is just a tool. Human judgment is still and will always be crucial. Even when we hit AGI, artificial general intelligence, the human will still matter. AI isn't perfect, and it isn't a substitute for sensitivity and awareness. You can't defer your human qualities onto AI, at least not yet. Don't blindly accept every suggestion. Think critically and choose the language that best fits your context and your audience. Check your facts. Check the facts that your AI is telling you are true, because AIs hallucinate and they make up stuff. If you ask an AI to do something, it will do it, whether it does it right or not. The AI doesn't care. You still care about that one. Consult diverse voices for comprehensive inclusivity. And just to sum up this particular slide, I think while AI can guide your writing, true inclusivity, as I think we probably already know, comes from empathy, respect, and a genuine desire to represent diverse perspectives. It's not just a tick box exercise. It really shows whether you care. And as humans, we do, AIs do not. So what else can AI do? Beyond grammar and bias checks, AI can offer accessibility tools. And I think this has already come up in the chat. Someone talked about fonts and structure and layout. The AI can help ensure your writing is readable for everyone, including those who may have visual impairments or learning differences. Translation tools, you can break language barriers and communicate effectively with global audiences. And then it can also check your style and your tone, refine your writing style for different contexts, achieve near perfect balance of clarity, formality, and engagement. But most of all, remember, we are all still learning. Okay, this is a journey. Start small, experiment with different tools and see what works best for you. Seek feedback. Share your writing with diverse individuals and listen to their experiences and suggestions. And keep learning. Stay informed about evolving language norms and inclusive writing practices. With AI as your guide and critical thinking as your compass, you can embark on a truly rewarding journey towards inclusive writing, creating content that welcomes, respects, and empowers everyone. Another part of what I do is I'm a book editor, and I use an add-on to Microsoft Word called Perfect It. And this is I think I pay about £60 or thereabouts to have this program run through a text for me and pull out any signs of bias, any signs of gendered professionalism, professional terms, etc. So that can be quite handy as well. If you're working on a really long document, a program such as Perfect It can work wonders. Kat, I just wonder, before we go on to the fourth part and the fourth and final part of today's webinar, I was just glancing back across the chat to see if there was anything that was worth highlighting or pulling out that you thought was interesting.
Yes. So there were some comments about, so I think Georgia's point here is really interesting. So they say that the point about disability, as a champion, I've spoken to people who prefer people with disabilities, but some people refer to themselves as disabled people. Respecting personal preference is important and checking with people is fine.
Yes.
So I think that's quite interesting.
And that again, that comes back to this idea of knowing your audience as well, which is all very well and good when you've got a small audience, but when you've got a large, comprehensive audience, it can be more difficult. But there are ways around that. That's a great point from Georgia. Thank you.
And yeah, there was just some other points around the fisher conversation that we had. So Alison said, some fishermen prefer being referred to as fishermen even when they are female, so respecting personal preference is important. So
do you know what that reminds me of is the Ironman competition, the enormous triathlon that happens, and that regardless of your sex, regardless of your gender, you seek to be an Ironman at the end of the competition.
Yes,
brilliant.
Absolutely. A few people are also asking about the slides and the recording. So as always with all Civil Service College webinars, we always record them and post them to our Civil Service College YouTube channel. And we usually send those people who've signed up a link, so to make it easier for you. So just clarification on that. So I'll let you carry on.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So as promised, this is the last section of the webinar. So these are the practical tips and resources. Obviously, this is just a whistle-stop tour of the inclusive writing programme, but I'd still like to think that you do go away from today with a couple of ideas that perhaps you didn't have originally. So there are lots of ideas really that you can draw upon, lots of ideas and creative ways to make your writing more inclusive. So we're going to sort of work around this clock, like a clock. So we'll start with 1 o'clock, if you like, or slice of the pie, depending on how hungry you are. So mindset matters. So remember, it all starts with empathy and respect. You can't write inclusively if you don't really mean it. Consider your audience's diverse perspectives and avoid harmful assumptions. Embrace continuous learning to stay informed about evolved language norms. Moving on, your language choices really do count. So choose your words wisely. Opt for people-first language and explore gender-neutral alternatives. And as Georgia has already said, don't be afraid to ask. Seek clarification. Speak to the people you want to communicate with. Engage your audience with active voice and be specific with precise terminology. Then we move on to diversity in action. Don't just talk about it, show it. Represent the world around you with authenticity, challenge stereotypes, and embrace cultural awareness. Make your writing accessible for as many people as you can. Consider visual impairments, learning differences, and language barriers, to name just a few. Tools and resources. So don't do it alone. Leverage your AI tools like Grammarly and ProWriting Aid for bias checks. Consult dictionaries and style guides like the Civil Service Style Guide for accurate language choices. Follow diversity and inclusion organisations to stay informed. And feedback is your friend. Embrace constructive criticism from diverse perspectives. Share your work, listen actively, and adapt your writing to grow. Remember, we all have bias. So approach inclusivity with humility and a willingness to learn. And keep learning, keep growing. The journey never ends. Explore new resources, engage with communities, and celebrate your progress. The key is to be curious, open-minded, and dedicated to continuous improvement. And by implementing these practical tips, you really can transform your writing into a powerful tool for inclusivity, fostering respect, understanding, connection in every word you choose. Remember, the power to write inclusively is within everyone's reach. So take action, embrace the journey, and craft the language that welcomes everyone. Kat, that brings me to the end of this sort of whistle-stop tour of the Inclusive Writing Day. Before I move on to the next slide, did you want to bring up anything that's in the chat? I can see that people are quite enjoying themselves in there, which is really great to see.
It's really great to see, and it's such a good opportunity, I think, to for people to also interact with each other, isn't it? No, I don't think there's anything specific there, so I think you can carry on, and then we can open it up for questions.
Sure, that sounds great. Thank you.
So just to sort of bring this to a conclusion, obviously, Rebecca, you have just been incredible this afternoon. I'm talking about this afternoon UK time, but it might be the morning or the evening for those of you who are joining. It was a very, very whistle-stop tour of inclusive writing, and I think all of us have got a lot to learn about this, and I've learned a lot just from some of the things in the chat. I think it's really important to remind ourselves that we can ask people for permission when addressing different people. So I think that's important, not to be afraid of that and just to make assumptions. For those of you who I mean, I think this has been an extremely popular webinar, but for those of you who are interested in learning more, we actually run a lot of courses around this particular topic. It's a very popular topic. So we have 2 upcoming virtual courses that you can see on the screen here. So one on the 26th of March and one on the 25th of September. And they are whole day courses. And then we also have an in-person one in our offices in London on the 13th of June. And all the contact information is here on the screen should you wish to email us or give us a call if you'd like more information. So before we finish, as we've got you, Rebecca, and your expertise, if anybody has any questions directly for Rebecca, please do ask them now. This is your opportunity. So either put them in the chat or you can use the Q&A function. Any questions that you've got directly for Rebecca, this is a great opportunity. So there's just a couple of comments coming in. So Mina would like to find out more about future classes, so we will contact you about that. So thanks for letting us know. Any specific questions for Rebecca?
Well, just while we're waiting for those to come through, there's an interesting comment that came through from somebody about on the use of AI, how AI image generators can perpetuate racial and gendered stereotypes. So if you were to ask DALL-E, for example, to draw you a picture of a CEO, chances are it's going to be a white male aged between 50 and 60 years old. And you absolutely right, the data on which language models and other AI tools such as DALL-E are created are based on biased data. So the images that are produced will then be biased. The most important thing is for us to know that that's the case, because once we have an informed choice, then we can decide what to do fairly. The danger comes when we don't realise what we're doing is based on something that's biased and therefore perpetuate that bias without wanting to. So I just wanted to highlight that really important point that's come through on chat.
Yeah, thank you. Somebody has just asked, what are your key call outs that make you wince when reading?
Oh, do you know what? I think for me it's cliches, and it's people who well, it's writing that lacks confidence. And you know when writing lacks confidence, when you say something in 50 words that can be said in 5 words. I think the most skilled writers are those who can write precisely and concisely, rather than trying desperately to work around a subject to get to the crux of it. So for me, I love reading writing that's confident and assured and that uses simple, plain language. We don't need to complicate things by showing off ourselves. You have to write for your reader, not write for yourself. I think that's a really important takeaway, and it makes I can feel myself wincing because of that. So that was a great word to use there.
Yes, thank you. Chrissy said, well said, it's a skill, Rebecca. So
yeah, no, it really is. A couple of other things. Someone's called up the Flash Kincaid calculator, and I haven't used that myself, but I know that that you can access other tools that will assess your writing. I'll be interested actually to see if the Hemingway tool is looking to expand in that area as well. That could be really interesting to look for, I think. I'm just going back with the firemen and the firefighters. I'm learning about trains. I'm learning about fishes. I'm learning about all things. This is fabulous.
Amazing to see all the different industries and points of view here. So I think I can't see any other questions other than people asking more information about the courses, which we will send out after the webinar. But I just want to say a huge thank you to you, Rebecca, for your time today. And I think what's great about this is that it really does give people a flavour for how we can be more inclusive, and it's some really practical things, and it was really, really engaging the way you delivered it. So I just want to say a big thank you. And we can always tell that when we see the numbers of people who join and who stay. So lots of lovely comments now coming through to say how great it was and how much they enjoyed it, and lots to think about, said Amy. So that's great to see.
Oh, I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful for people taking the time to write in the chat box. And thank you for engaging in the webinar as well. It's so much more, I think we get so much more from something when we contribute to it. So thank you very much indeed for being such a great audience. And Kat, thanks to you for facilitating so expertly.
Pleasure. Yeah, it's something we're so passionate about at Civil Service College, just highlighting different areas that we know are challenging for the sector. So it's just great to have this opportunity to get this knowledge and to do it in such a sort of interesting way. So yeah, lots of people coming in to say thank you. Alana said thank you, that was great, especially useful for people starting out embedding inclusive writing in day-to-day work. So yeah, so if you want to, you can leave the webinar now, and we'll just close it and stop the recording, and then we'll share this like I said, shortly on our YouTube channel. So nice comment about the AI. Yeah, it's definitely interesting to share those useful resources and tools as well, isn't it?
Oh, people have been very kind.
It's amazing the reach that we've got this afternoon, really incredible.
Yeah.
All these different locations, different organisations, that's really great.